All right, for more on this election, let's bring in political analyst and former Queen's Park correspondent, Keith Leslie. Keith, we aren't supposed to have an election until June of 2026. Is this political opportunism, or is there something to this Ford idea of having a strong mandate for the next 4 years?
He's already got a strong mandate. He's got almost a year and a half left in it. He's got a huge majority in the Ontario legislature. So there's absolutely no need for him to call an election right now. I mean, why does he need to be in office for 4 years, the same amount of time as Donald Trump? I would think over the next 16 to 18 months, we ought to be able to see where Trump is going and have Canada's reaction to it implemented by that time. So this just seems him taking advantage of the situation. He wants to get out ahead of, possibly campaigning against Pierre Poilievre in a federal election. He wants to get out ahead of the possible RCMP report into the Greenbelt scandal. So it's him taking advantage of the situation now. He's riding very high in the polls, and so he's pulling the plug early. And a February election, not what most people are looking forward to.
So let's say if Ford gets another majority on February 27th, Election Day, how does that impact Ontario's ability to respond to Trump's tariff threat? Is there an advantage that Ford sees that maybe we're not seeing?
I don't see it. I mean, I don't see how Donald Trump is going to sit back and go, oh, well, Doug Ford went early and got a big majority government, even bigger than the one he had, so I'm going to sit down and listen to Doug Ford. The whole foreign affairs thing, the whole negotiations on these tariffs and all that, that's a federal responsibility. And while Doug Ford has been able to step in as the chair of the Council of Federation of the Premiers Conference, and so he's getting a national stage right now, but in the end, he can rail against Trump's tariffs or whatever Trump is going to do, but it's going to take the federal government to actually negotiate with the Trump administration and to implement whatever responses Canada needs to take.
We're going to show our viewers the latest polling, which shows his support has actually increased of late, while the Liberals and NDP have taken a hint. Why do you think that is?
Well, for the most part, Doug Ford has been very successful at donning the Captain Canada hat. Coming in with that hat, that Canada is not for sale. People like what he is saying about dealing with Trump. Let's stand up to him toe-to-toe. Let's go dollar for dollar tariff countervails, as opposed to what Premier Smith is saying in Alberta, trying to carve out their own thing. Doug Ford is strongly standing up to Trump, saying, you can't just back down to this guy. We can't give him appeasement. And I think that's something most Canadians most Ontario voters would like to see. So on that file, on the Captain Canada file, I think he's doing very well and getting a lot of respect for what he's doing on it.
All right, we've talked about Ford. Let's talk about his opponents. Do you think the Liberals and the NDP are ready for an election? Are their party coffers full?
Well, they claim they're ready for an election, but they couldn't get either one of their leaders in front of the TV cameras the day Doug Ford confirms he's calling election for February 27th. That looks to me to be very weak. The problem is, of course, that there's a lot of people that want to get rid of Doug Ford, but the NDP and the Liberals are splitting the anti-Ford vote almost evenly, and so that keeps him very high in the polls. It keeps him over 40%, and that's going to get him out of the majority government. One thing that the timing of this really helps Doug Ford and hurts Bonnie Crombie, the new Liberal leader. She's been in the position a year. She doesn't really have, much of a profile in Ontario, and yet she needs volunteers and staff to work this campaign that Doug Ford just called. They're all committed already to the federal leadership race in Ottawa. So it's going to be hard for the Liberals to mount an effective Ontario campaign when almost all of their volunteers and staff would already be working on the federal leadership race.
All right, that's former Queen's Park correspondent and political analyst Keith Leslie. Keith, thanks for your time, my friend.